This is gonna take crackerjack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time to do another comic book retrospective. Last week we did classic Flash, like essential stories. This week we're going to the first family of Marvel Comics, the Fantastic Four. We're going to do one comic from the original creative team of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and we're going to do another comic from the John Byrne run, which is it the best Fantastic Four run ever? It's right up there with the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby stuff. This was excellent. Had a great time. I do want to say thank you very much to my two guests that brought up these issues that we're going to review today. First up, we've got comic book writer, award-winning editor, Joe Corralo. How you doing?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Next up, we got the comic book hoarder himself, Eric Breen. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
So these are some emotional Fantastic Four issues. They pack a punch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you better be ready to have some feels moved if you're going to read Fantastic Four 51 and Fantastic Four 285. Now, Joe, let's talk about the importance of the Fantastic Four. This is essentially the comic that sprungboard Marvel Comics into what it is today. It kind of laid the foundation. We've been talking about how even the stuff we've been reading in these Avengers classics, it's almost all mined out of these original Fantastic Four stories.
Oh, yeah. I mean, between that, all the characters that are created on these pages, just setting up everything. I mean, Doctor Doom, obviously, is... you're not a hero in the Marvel Universe unless you fought Doctor Doom. Even Dazzler fought Doctor Doom. Was one of the few characters that Doctor Doom beat her in her own book, but that's a different story. Again, Galactus, huge threat to... everyone. And yeah, I mean, it's the world's greatest comic magazine, at least since I think it was issue 3 they started putting that on there. Was it?
So it was an immediate hit, right?
Yeah, despite the fact that issue 3 Johnny Storm has 2 left hands, but that happens. You gotta. Those were very tight deadlines, but yeah.
So, Eric, as someone who's been reading comics, essentially as long as I've been alive, what was it when you first discovered the Fantastic Four? Was it love at first sight? Did it take a little while to warm up to them, or did it just stand out amongst the crowd?
No, the first new Marvel comic I ever bought in my life was Fantastic Four 167, and that was the second part of a 2-part Hulk story where the twist this time was the Thing didn't like the way the military was treating the Hulk, so he broke him out and they teamed up against the army and the rest of the Fantastic Four. And I saw it, I go, man, this is really cool, because at the end of the story, he turned back into Ben Grimm seemingly permanently. And I thought, man, this is some really cool stuff. So I had access to, my brother's friend had some issues, and I got a hold of those, and then got to go back and read things like Marvel Collector's Item Classics, which had reprints of the early issues. And those, you could get this, you couldn't get, all the stuff. Although at the time that was still being published. So they were, if you get a hold of those, you could get the reprints. And I did have a scattering of those, and the Stan and Jack stuff was like, man, this stuff is incredible. And put it in context of what we're going to do today. In just like 1 year's time, you introduce the Inhumans, Galactus, Silver Surfer, Black Panther, and in between, in a supposed catch your breath issue, they deliver a one-off that is maybe better thought of to this day than the stuff I just mentioned. So I mean, creatively, it was incredible the way they just kept coming up with great story after great story.
A lot of people think of Stan Lee as like an idea guy. He created all these great characters. Obviously, he did write a lot of I think he's a little bit underrated. I think a lot of his dialogue is actually quite good. But in Fantastic Four, it does feel like it's a step up, Joe. Like, it feels like these were the characters that he got the best. It feels like he liked the family dynamics of the team, and he really enhanced it.
Yeah, and I mean, Kirby brought a lot of that to the table. Prior to this, he was doing Challengers of the Unknown, and he brought a lot of the Challengers of the Unknown to to the Fantastic Four. This is where you can say that this is where Stan shined, because while there was that level of, bickering and treating it like a family, I think Stan elevated that dynamic from what we saw in Challengers of the Unknown at the time, which was a key to the success of the book. And I mean, just designs of characters like the Human Torch and the Thing. If you had a character like the Thing in Challengers of the Unknown, maybe that would have been a bigger thing. But Stan, part of what I think gets lost when people talk about Stan and his dialogue is he's writing almost all of the line and editing it, making sure it gets out on, in a reasonable time. So this is the equivalent of, like some small publishers today where you see people, who are writing a lot of the books or something like that. But what Stan was able to do and the quality of the work he was able to put out while working with these artists it was unprecedented, and we've never seen it since then. So it really does feel special, 60 years later.
So, Eric, there's one last point I want to talk about the Fantastic Four, then we'll get into these comics. The heart and soul of the team is essentially Ben Grimm. Reed Richards is the leader. Sue Storm, maybe not initially, is certainly the co-leader after a while. But without Ben Grimm, I don't know if the team works. He's that grounded guy that he will say anything. He's obtuse at sometimes, but he always speaks the truth, at least from his perspective. And I just love the dynamic between him and Johnny. Like, they couldn't be more opposite, but you can tell in the end there's like a definite, there's respect and there's love in the end, even though they don't always agree.
Yeah, well, they figured that out pretty early on, that they had something with those two, even though, Ben and Reed were friends from college. When in the very early Marvel, there was a series called Strange Tales that had the Human Torch. So he was in two of the handful of superhero books at the beginning, and about 15 issues or so in, they brought the Thing in. So that for the remainder of that run, it was basically like a buddy book with Ben and Johnny, and that really helped flesh out that friendship that carried over into the Fantastic Four, and when done well, exists to this day. Because there's a huge age difference between the two. And, like I said, that nothing really in common other than the fact that they both as it turns out, they both kind of like the same things, and they are part of a family. So it's just it was almost like Ben became the big brother Johnny didn't have to go with the big sister he had. So yeah, that's one of the neater dynamics at Marvel Comics, is their relationship through the years.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite pairings. So we're going to talk about Fantastic Four 51 first. Obviously, this is Stan Lee, Jack Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
At their zenith, this is them, the two of them working together as well as you can possibly imagine. The comic's name is This Man, This Monster. And you mentioned earlier, Joe, that the amount of characters that have been introduced, in this early part of the Fantastic Four run. We get a character introduced here, but I don't think we ever learn really who he is. And it's just a really interesting story with that.
Yeah, he what was it? He's in the background of issues prior to this. I haven't read the issues prior to this for a little bit, but you see him a bit in the background. So if you had already been reading, month to month, you'd at least recognize the character, but you didn't really know exactly what he was trying to do until this issue. But to put it in a little more context, just some interesting tidbits. The month before this issue came out was when Zack Snyder was born. so it's interesting thinking about that way. But this is the same month, and I put this together because we did the Poison Ivy, saving her video the other week. This is the same month that Batman 181, the first appearance of Poison Ivy, came out. And you'd also see the second to last Ditko Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 37 came out. So this was just about the end of that era. So there's interesting things going on, and this is the same month that the Doom Patrol issue with the wedding of Rita and Mentalo came out. Fantastic Four had the wedding first, but this was one of the first big DC weddings. And the month after this came out would be the first published comics work of Jim Shooter in Adventure Comics 346.
Wow. So he would have been about 15?
14, I think.
That's crazy. He's a wonderkin. This thing about Jim Shooter. So we get into this story now. We've got this character. He's distinctive looking. He has the head essentially of the Thing, but he's human. And he offers Ben Grimm the Thing a place to stay. He's tired. He's been out hanging out, so he's going to go and sleep there. And then while he's sleeping, he essentially steals his powers, and he becomes the Thing, and Ben Grimm wakes up as his human self. What the hell's going on here, Joe? He's been plotting the whole time to steal his powers?
Yeah, I mean, to get revenge on Reed, which a lot of people were envious of Reed, but I don't think we can talk more about this until we also highlight Joe Sinnott, the inker here. He is considered by a lot of people to be the best inker for Kirby on this book. I'm inclined to agree. In particular, I think he's probably the best inker on the Thing. For whatever reason, whenever I see Joe Sinnott inking Fantastic Four, the Thing always pops. He just inks him just right, and just the right amount of thick lines and shading, and really gives you the feeling that he's this like big rocky character. And he only passed away I think a couple of years ago now, but you'd be hard pressed to find a better inker for Jack on Fantastic Four.
Eric, what were your thoughts about this? Obviously, he immediately goes over to the Baxter building, and he's impostering the Thing, and Ben Grimm wakes up. He's got to tell Reed what's going on, but Reed doesn't believe it. He says, "You're the imposter. We got the Thing right here in our building," and obviously the shenanigans and the adventure is about to begin.
Okay, then the first thing I would say is you're talking about maybe the smartest man in the world. Here's where the suspension of disbelief. Now, I don't know if all of Ben's memories transferred into this guy. I don't think they did. So one simple question could have, solved the mystery, since you had a guy that looked like the Thing and a guy that looked just like the guy that becomes the Thing. So they could have maybe wrapped that up with one question. But I remember when I first read this, I had read, I think it was Fantastic Four 34, which had a character named Gregory Gideon, who looked a lot like this guy. And at first I thought, oh, this is Gideon, but it turns out it wasn't. But yeah, this story, I said, the way they set it up, it's this guy that just wants to prove that he's a better everything than Reed Richards, and the way he's going to do it is by taking over the Thing's identity, and then I guess you're destroying them from within. And he walks into literally the golden opportunity the minute he gets there, which guy's probably thinking, man, this is going to be way easier than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But
so in the meantime, we do get a little interlude with a Johnny story where he and Wyatt Wingfoot, or I guess they're at college, they're kind of getting bullied or whatever. But then the college football coach recognizes his friend. He's like, "Hey, your dad was like a star player. We need you on the team." I'm assuming this sets up something later on, because it felt like almost unnecessary to the story. I was like, let's get back to the other thing that's happening.
Yeah, there's a bit of that, but Wyatt Wingfoot is established as a good friend of Johnny's and joins him on adventures. After that, he's well beyond college. So you do see a lot more of him, and then obviously later on he dates a certain She-Hulk. So
to bring back one of our past retrospectives, the Avengers Defenders War, the way the evil eye was split into 6 pieces was when Johnny was about to use it, it's Wyatt Wingfoot that shoots it out of his hand.
Mm.
Nice.
Yeah.
There we go. Everything comes back to this series right here in
There you
Marvel
go.
Comics. It's crazy. So there's that little interlude, and I'm sure that gets paid off somewhere down the line.
Mhm.
And we get back to this story that Eric was alluding to. And this has one of the craziest things. The best thing about, I know everyone talks about the Kirby Crackle and the things that we get to see when they're in the cosmic, but whenever he decides that he's going to design some type of machinery or scientific equipment, he goes balls out. Like, I don't know where Jack Kirby came up with this stuff, but his machine that's going to take Reed Richards to the negative zone is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, Breed. I loved it.
Yeah, that, and again, you see things like that and you go, I wonder whatever happened to that machine, because you never saw it again. But there was so many of those, and Kirby liked to do those things. We would take actual pictures of space even and put the characters in there. So he had quite the imagination, and that one-page spread where Reed's looking at that thing, where I said, the rest of the members of the team probably couldn't find the entrance to it, but
it's a showstopper. You don't just read through that page. You look at it, you're like, oh my goodness, look at all the weird details going on here, Joe.
Yeah, there's people act like, especially people that aren't very familiar with the Silver Age and this era of Marvel. They act like splash pages were invented in the last few decades, and that old stuffy comics are just tons of panels with tons of words. There are 3 splash pages in this issue, and they're gorgeous. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions on Silver Age comics, also Golden Age comics, but a lot of people that don't read them seem to think that they're written for children that like reading big words and tons of panels and janky artwork and stuff like that. And I wish more people would, actually read the books instead of just being like, oh, I don't think that's for me.
So we get we see the machine. We know Reed is going to go into the negative zone, and he needs Thing essentially to tether him. He's like, you hold me, you make sure that that I don't get lost. I don't know exactly where I'm going, and that kind of gets us into the big conflict or the story that's about to happen, Joe. So Reed goes in there, and the imposter Thing is Reed's just handed himself on a silver platter. He's like, boom, might as well let him go, kind of thing. And then something happens along the way where his opinion of Reed and his understanding of what Reed Richards is and what he's accomplishing as a member of the Fantastic Four as the leader changes. So when Reed's tether breaks and he's being lost in the negative zone, the imposter is just kind of jumps in there and decides to save him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's really interesting watching it. I mean, great artwork. That last panel on page 15, where it's like Reed's helmet and all that's like getting engulfed. I mean, all of this is it's gorgeous. The whole thing. And I keep saying thing, and it's kind of, but yeah, it's Kirby's really going all out with the crazy designs in the background in this sort of negative zone, which would play a big role in a lot of Fantastic Four issues to come, where they keep
even
trying
Civil
to
War. They were imprisoning people in the negative zone, right?
I mean, they keep trying to. They find horrible things and characters here and whatnot. It becomes a story point that they keep mining, to this day, really. So again, it's interesting, and it all happened here in Fantastic Four.
Now, real quick, the page before that, I think, is the best example of what Stan and Jack were all about. You had this psychedelic looking splash page where Reed is, headed into the great unknown, and his dialogue, I've done it. I'm drifting into a world of limitless dimensions. It's the crossroads of infinity, the junction to everywhere. Now, again, like I said, because you got Stan at his flowery best and Jack at his, whatever it was he was doing on this panel. But let me just say real quick, again, as we say, great story. But another thing that you kind of look at, you go, okay, if I were going to jump into the negative zone, trying to find a way to get into subspace at more than light speed, the guy I'm asking to make sure I don't die, we are about 5 minutes away from questioning his legitimacy through, of his identity, because you've got the Thing and you've got Ben Grimm saying he's an imposter. I would have might maybe do a little bit more checking before I kicked the other guy out and trusted, the other guy to basically, with my life. Just a thought. Doesn't diminish from the story, but again, it's a question that should have been raised.
Really enhances the story, Eric, is the question of who is this character? You don't know, there's a beef, but you don't know exactly what the beef is. Mm-hmm. And he changes his mind, and he essentially becomes a hero. He goes in there, sacrifices himself, and saves Reed Richards in the end.
Yeah, I don't think
why did he sacrifice himself? What was the story behind that? And I think that it enhances everything, like the mystery of who this man is.
Yeah, the fact that we never learned his name, and you find out it really isn't important. His motivation is simple: greed and jealousy. But it just, by the limited amount of exposure to Reed's world, he realizes this man is not who I thought he was. He is truly selfless. And especially when they're in the negative zone, and Reed is more concerned for Ben, and he has that, this is the man I've hated all this time. And he realizes that Reed is truly a selfless man, and that's even though he'd pretty much completed his face turn by then, he realized I've got to make up for it, and that's why he picks him up. And luckily he had Ben's unerring accuracy with his throwing arm when he throws him back towards the Baxter building, so that it just worked on every level. And I don't think the story would have been as good if we'd known more about the guy. And I think that was by design.
It's the craft involved, Joe, that's just really impressive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the craft here, everything, the whole bit. Then, and adding on to
the big reveal,
the emotion to all of it with, Ben trying to, get back with Alicia.
Now that he looks normal again, he feels confident enough to go and propose. And then as he's about to do it, obviously the other Thing is perished, and he turns back into the Thing, and he has to kind of run off.
Yeah,
because
prior to this, he was thinking he was going to lose Alicia to Silver Surfer, and that continues to play out in the issues going forward until that comes to a head. So there are a lot of subplots and things like that. Like, I mean, we basically have two subplots going on during this story with, Johnny and Ben. Oddly enough, there's a subplot with Ben while the fake Ben is doing the stuff to continue moving the plot forward. So, there were subplots in comics before Chris Claremont. There were, I assure you.
Yep, they've been mining him for so long, and then at the end, Ben does arrive. They realize the Thing isn't dead. Reed and Sue think that they've just lost, their friend. They realize he's not dead, and they realize who just died. Like, who just saved your life? Someone saved your life, and and it's just a mystery into time. And I think it ends perfectly. And this is, they just don't make them like they used to, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, there's too much decompression. This is a satisfying story, all in one. Even though you don't have all the plot threads tied up, you have a couple of subplots going on, you're still satisfied after you read it. And you can put it down and be like, I'm good. That was a good story, and I'm looking forward to the next one, but you still have a sense of satisfaction. And I think I mean, obviously that's missing now because people have been writing for the trade and now they're writing for the omnibus and all of that. But I would like to see more. They don't necessarily have to be one and done exactly, but more meat in a story.
Short burst storytelling.
No.
Yeah. All right, Eric, do you have any last words that you want to say about Fantastic Four 51 before we get into this next John Byrne classic?
No, just if you want to see how the Ben Silver Surfer Alicia triangle plays out, just jump ahead to issue 55 and you'll get your answer.
Well, just go back and start reading it from issue 1. You're gonna thank us for it. This is
absolutely.
This is it's beautiful. You're gonna see so many things that you see in comics today, and you'll be amazed. So let's move over to another very notable Fantastic Four run. Is it the best Fantastic Four run ever? Is it second best? I think it's probably up there with Stan and Jack. It's the John Byrne Fantastic Four 285. The name of this hero or this story is Hero. And this is, I don't know, Joe, like there's not a lot of comic books that really, make me well up, maybe, get a little misty eyed. This is one of them because it's really the tragedy that comes along with being a hero. There are the highest of highs, when you save the city or maybe you save the universe, but there are all the lowest lows, the responsibility that you have to your community, that maybe people will look up to you and put themselves in harm's way trying to emulate you because they're inspired by your actions, and not everyone is ready to be a hero. And that is essentially a lot of what this story is about. And it's about a young man, I believe his name is Thomas Hansen. He's 13 years old. And initially, we've got a doctor. And I love it that the doctor's smoking. You'd never see that even in a movie nowadays. And the boy has burnt himself, and he's in the hospital. And that's kind of the introduction that we get to him. Eric, I thought this was really effective, just the way that you set the table for the story, and you're going to hear about some tragedy.
Yeah, they said, interesting beginning. And I said the fact that she was smoking, with fire and all that stuff. And then and then the story kind of, it's like you come in the middle of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And, when she tries to, we get the setup first with the little kid's life where, he gets caught reading a comic book in class and the teacher's trying to, she knows she's got to handle.
Why are you wasting your life living the real world?
Well, but she'll say, and I was a kid once too. I understand that but you have to, you have to put this stuff down at some point. And then he's arguing, but he's the greatest hero. He's this and this. And you find out that this, the Human Torch means everything to him. And then, of course, on the way home, he gets shaken down by the bullies that tell him, don't forget, you got to give me your lunch money and do my homework.
Because they've made a trade. This is something I completely related to, Eric. I've made trades in the cafeteria. He ended up trading, I think, a month's worth of lunch money and to do like homework just to get his hands on a magazine with an article about the Human Torch Johnny Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing the teacher took from him and essentially threw away.
Yeah, and then the bit where he hangs out with that old hippie guy,
Mm-hmm.
and that
flying model planes, kind of thing.
And when he has to go do something, and he goes, put my stuff away for me, little dude. And he goes, but be careful with that stuff. You can turn yourself into another Human Torch with that. And that panel where you got the can real big in the panel, and then it's black silhouetted, and what's coming. And it's oh man, this is just because you already know what's happening, and even though they lead you right up to it, it's still like, oh, ugh.
Yeah, and before that, I'm pretty sure it's before that. There's he calls the Avengers Mansion,
Jarvis.
And he gets Jarvis, and the Human Torch isn't there, and it adds to the tragedy because it makes you think maybe if Johnny was there and picked up the phone, he wouldn't have done that.
Right when he goes, I just wanted him to know my name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the accident happens. The boy receives very horrific burns, and he's essentially, his days are numbered. The doctors know that. His parents know it. And then eventually, Johnny Storm himself finds out. I believe he's talking to the doctor, and he goes to visit him. And when he interacts with the parents, it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah,
because they essentially blame him for what happened. They said he looked up to you, he idolized the Human Torch, and you're the reason that he's burned and he's dying.
And there's a bit before that when Johnny meets the doctor and he finds out her name is Dr. Darling, and he goes right into CAD mode and goes, "Hey doc, do you get ribbed all the time for having Dr. Darling?" She goes, "I work in a burn ward. There's not much time for humor there." And you just see like Johnny go like that, and then she tells him why she's there, and it's just like the look on his face going from
because he's the fun-loving,
yes,
adventure character.
Yeah, nothing malicious, but you realize,
he has to go into super serious mode, and just the interaction with the parents, Joe, is it's heartbreaking. I completely understand why their point of view, and then what's Johnny supposed to do? Tell him, hey, listen, you just kind of eat it at that point.
Oh yeah, no, it's it adds to how powerful this all is. It's they are so like the dad, especially, like this isn't the last you're hearing from us, kind of thing. And then it all comes to, he's bummed out, he's talking with Alicia and She-Hulk, and then we get a visit from the Beyonder. And the Beyonder is, I guess you could say, is kind of helping Johnny here. It's tragic what the Beyonder is sort of doing and putting Johnny through, but he's helping him in a way.
Yeah, if a little context of this was during Secret Wars 2, and Jim Shooter had mandated that every book include him at least once while the series was going on. Some of the writers were not particularly happy about that. Chief among them, John Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
But what he was able to do is the quintessential making lemonades out of lemons, because this was probably the best Beyonder appearance of any of these Secret War tie-ins, because he basically was anybody that he was written the way the writer wanted him to do to fit the story, which doesn't always work. But in this case, the Beyonder kind of was anything that came to mind. And the way he guided Johnny, taking him back into the past and showing the kid in his room, which was virtually a shrine to the Human Torch, kind of told me two things. The kid had a sad, they actually revealed the kid had a sad, lonely life. And then I went back to the hospital scene when the wife slaps him and the dad threatens him. I realized this kid also had shit parents who are taking out their failures on Johnny Storm by putting all the blame on him, which again added another level of power to this story. And then when the Beyonder says, he didn't die because of you, it was through you that Tommy Hansen lived. And I thought that was, and that kind of lifted Johnny's spirits, which
because he was the source of joy in his life.
Yes. Yeah. Because it was obvious the kid had nothing else.
Yeah, he was bullied at school. People were taking advantage of him. And the one thing he had was the stories of Johnny Storm and, the heroics that and he was looking up to him. That's what he wanted to aspire to be. And like I said, it's the tragedy of being a hero.
Mm-hmm.
You get the highest highs, but you've also got to deal with the lowest lows. One of the things that I think have always made Spider-Man exceptionally relatable as well is you get to see him in those low moments. And we don't always see Johnny Storm in his low moments, but I think John Byrne absolutely executed it right here. And, just like we said earlier, you can tell these amazing stories in one comic issue.
Yeah. Well, this story, and there's another one we're talking about, like your tragic stories involving children. There's a backup feature in Spider-Man 248, The Kid Who Collected Spider-Man, which will tug at your feels every bit as hard as this one. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's another recommendation, and we should probably do that someday.
Yeah.
But yeah, this story I thought worked until the very last little line at the end when the doctor quotes F. Scott Fitzgerald and then says, and somehow I would think that Tommy would agree that it had a happy ending. I'm thinking maybe not. He's dead.
No.
But other
Nah.
than that, I mean, that kind of, doesn't change how good the story is. I just think that last line might have been misplaced, but overall, it was a tremendous story. And another example. I mean, these issues were 20 years apart. How good, a one and done story could be, even having to weave in, like I said, he had to put the Beyonder in. The way he was able to, seamlessly mix that into the story, is if that story doesn't work, it doesn't work as well without the Beyonder. So what he was able to do, I said, just it's storytelling 101 on how to really do a powerful one issue.
Yeah.
It's kind of depressing that the Fantastic Four just aren't, like, they're there, but they don't feel important in the Marvel universe when they used to be almost the bedrock of everything at Marvel. And we used to get stories like this. Joe, do you have any last words about Fantastic Four 258, or maybe some things that 285, or maybe something we skipped over that you really needed to highlight?
I mean, one of the only, it's not too much other than, it's also important to mention, Al Gordon inked it. Glynis Oliver was the colorist who colored a hefty portion of the Marvel Bronze Age. She colored the majority of Uncanny X-Men between issues 100 and 300, which I think a lot of people consider like one of the highest points of that book. John Workman was the letterer here. He's one of my all-time favorite letterers. He's done incredible work. If you're reading a comic and you see that John Workman lettered it, it's going to look really nice. And lastly, I would point out, Mike Carlin edited this. A lot of people probably are more familiar with Mike Carlin being the editor on the Superman books shortly after this. And wouldn't you know it, that John Byrne guy, I think he might have done some Superman too. It's funny how these things sort of work.
Kind of transformative work on Superman.
Yeah. But you pay attention to these credits, you start seeing the through lines and you start going, oh, okay, so Mike Carlin went there. Oh, all right. Okay, I see what happened here.
So, Eric, I imagine you probably read this one in the moment. You probably got it off the shelf, and got to read it as it was coming out. Is there anything else you just want to say about like the impact it had on you, maybe the way you felt when you got to read it, or anything else about the story kind of before we wrap this up?
Well, let's say that by this time, the Byrne FF run had started to lose a little bit of its steam, but this issue was as good as any that he did on the title. And it's interesting. The two books we read today, 51, the very next issue, we got the introduction of the Black Panther. In 285, the very next issue, we got the resurrection of Jean Grey. So what that means, probably nothing, but it was interesting that these were one-offs right before huge, events that would, have ramifications to this day happened. Yeah. And I said, it's, and we're talking about best FF runs. Lee and Kirby, I think that their Fantastic Four is the best run in comic book history. Byrne's FF can play in that sandbox. It's close. No other run can even enter the conversation. So
do you think that's one of the reasons that a lot of big name creators, when they come in, they don't try to go on Fantastic Four, or if they do, they just don't do a whole lot of interesting things because the bar is essentially set so high that, even when Hickman is on there, his Fantastic Four run is considered good. It's almost not in the conversation, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Hickman's also, I think, kind of outshined himself in a lot of ways. I think most people think of his Avengers run and overlook his Fantastic Four, and also his creator-owned work. I personally prefer Hickman in his creator-owned work. Manhattan Projects is one of my favorite things he's done, but obviously East to West and things like that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people they'll bring up the Mark Waid run with Mike Wirango, but I got to give a shout out to one of the single most underrated writers at Marvel who has consistently followed up, solid runs and is always forgotten, and that's Tom DeFalco. Tom DeFalco followed up Roger Stern on Spider-Man. He followed up Walt Simonson on Thor. And then he followed up Walt Simonson again with Fantastic Four during Walt's brief stint after Byrne. And then Tom was on Fantastic Four for a little while. Tom, like, if you look at his work in a vacuum, he does solid work with these characters. There's a reason he became the editor-in-chief of Marvel for a bit. But when you put it in context, it's like there was no way people were gonna like this as much, especially Spider-Man and Thor following up, Stern and Simonson. It's incredible. So, don't overlook those. A lot of his work in those have been put in epic collections. I don't think they put any of it in hardcovers. Again, poor guy. Like, he doesn't get that special treatment because of how forgotten it is. But check out Tom DeFalco's Fantastic Four sometime. It's really not nearly like it's I'd say it's above average.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. I think this is quickly becoming a lot of viewers of the channel's favorite segments that we're doing, highlighting some of this old stuff that maybe people haven't read. There's certainly so many classic Fantastic Four stories. We wanted to go kind of highlight a couple of things a little bit off the beaten path. Next week, we'll be doing a DC comic. And then after that, I think we're going to do Iron Man. So thank you guys so much. And I'm imagining we're done here, right? Nothing else to say?
I think we are.
Enough
All right,
said.
we're done here. Enough said.